Welcome in to the PFF podcast. Steve Palazzolo back here with Sam Monson. We're back home. We're back in the podcast closet, the Nook. After, were you on your couch last week? Is that what it was?
Let's not say we were on the couch. I was on the couch.
Oh, I
you were
had
on
my
the
own
chair separately.
We were in your living room.
Yes.
It was on location last week.
But it wasn't an intimate couch setting for both of us. Only one of us was.
I wasn't presenting that picture.
That's kind of how it was coming off, is all I'm saying.
It was just a different week.
Yes.
A lot of construction over here. We've got Monday Night Football coming into town over here.
We do?
You could feel the buzz. I saw 2 Steelers fans this morning.
Yes.
And it was buzzing.
Huge traveling population. They were renowned for their support on the road, and all 2 of them were in the middle of Cincinnati as we were on the way to Kroger.
I felt it. I felt the buzz. If you're listening to this, chances are Monday Night Football already happened, and it was a doozy. It was quite the game if it already happened. But, all right, Sam and I are here to recap Week 13, some more fascinating movement on the NFC side, Sam. Great game, Sunday Night Football. It should have been a great game. You were so sad about the fumble. But the Eagles lose their second game of the season. The Seahawks win. They remain 1 game behind the Los Angeles Rams in the NFC West division race. The NFC is just awesome. A lot of fun. I think the playoffs are just going to be crazy. And last night, Sunday night's game was a bit of a preview of that.
Yeah, it was. I like I say, I think it was almost a very good game. It was shaping up to be a very good game. And then the Philadelphia Eagles driving to tie the game at 10 apiece. Carson Wentz took the ball on an option play, I think, scrambling towards the goal line, dived out and gets stripped of the ball, forced a fumble, a couple of yards shy from going in, and what was about to become the game-tying score ended up becoming a turnover because the ball went through the end zone, Seahawks ball, and the Eagles never really recovered from that. The Seahawks then used that to take a bit of a lead, which the Eagles never fully recovered from. So I think this was shaping up to be a really close, really hard-fought game. Ended up being a relatively comfortable win for the Seahawks. But I think it's interesting what it says about both these 2 teams. You know, the Seahawks were able to knock off what was the best team in the NFL heading into that week at home. Kind of classic Seahawks win. You know, a team that is still flawed, but was able to come up big at home, as they've done so many times before. Russell Wilson being absolutely freaky in a way that only Russell Wilson can really do.
Yep.
And the defense making some big plays as well. We said heading into this game that the single biggest mismatch on paper was the best defensive front in the game in the Philadelphia Eagles going up against one of the worst offensive lines in the NFL in the Seahawks. And that mismatch just looked too big on paper, certainly for me, to get past. I mean, that was the game right there. But actually, the Seahawks offensive line did okay against a really formidable Eagles front. And the real differentiator was on the other side of the ball, where the Eagles offensive line, the left side, the big V and Stefan Wisniewski.
Vitae.
Yeah, at left tackle and left guard, just got absolutely taken to pieces by the Seahawks defensive front. Those 2 combined to allow 21 total pressures.
That's crazy.
Just as a pair. The Seahawks' entirety on offense allowed 17. So those 2 guys allowed 4 more pressures than the whole Seahawks offense did over the course of that game. And that, I think, really was the game. It was those 2 just allowing too much pressure for that offense to really get rolling.
And Wisniewski gave up 11 himself. He has 20 on the entire season.
Yeah.
That is a crazy one-sided performance. We've been talking about the Seattle defense just not looking the same, and not just like Richard Sherman being hurt and Cam Chancellor being hurt, but that defensive front from Seattle, whereas they've been a top 5 pressure team every year since 2013. They're more middle of the pack this year, but they did finally get a lot more pressure on Sunday night. But they hadn't been doing that game in, game out this season.
And Vitae as well was 10 pressures out of 24 this season.
That's just crazy. So the Eagles' offensive line has been one of the league's best. Now, granted, they've lost Jason Peters, and Vitae's been okay filling in, but this is their worst performance overall, and it really does come down to those 2 guys.
Yeah, I mean, those guys got absolutely taken to pieces. That was a big part of this game. For the Eagles, though, I don't think it means it. The next game, I think, is the more important one for Philadelphia. So they're on this.
Goff, Wentz won?
Yeah, they're on this West Coast swing. They go out west, they take on the Seahawks, and they take on the Rams in a 1-2 punch in that division. And Brandon Graham, I heard on Sirius Radio talking before this game, and he was saying, this is a big game to find out who they were. They're going to take a 2-game swing on the West Coast the whole time against 2 very good-looking teams, and they're going to see what that says about them. If they go 2-0 and they look dominant again, you're going to be saying, wow, this is the Super Bowl favorite. Now they're 0-1 on this swing. They're going up against another good team. This is a big game. If they go 0-2, suddenly you're talking about a team that is maybe a paper champion, that it's not as good as people thought they were. If they have one big game and they beat the Rams and then they're just 1-1, having lost to a Seattle team at home that rarely loses, things are fine. You're allowed to hiccup. But I think this is the big game is the one upcoming for this Eagles team.
No, I think so too. And a lot of people were on Twitter saying, "Hey, relax, Eagles fans. It's okay. You could still get a bye." And other people saying this shows just how important it is to get that bye and to play at home because nobody wants to really travel to Seattle, no matter how banged up they are, no matter what they've got going on that particular season. They still have more than enough pieces. Can we discuss Bobby Wagner for a second right now?
Yep.
93 solo tackles by our numbers, which we keep track completely separate from the NFL. 93 solo, 18 assists, 0 missed tackles, 98.8 PFF grade right now. So he is tickling the top of our linebacker grades. Don't shake your head at me. Either of you guys.
Grip strength is insane. You hear about players constantly busting through arm tackles. They don't when it's Bobby Wagner. He gets an arm on you and it just locks on like a.
I noticed that a lot last night too. There are plays where it's like, here's a dump off, it's 3 or 4 yards. It could easily turn into just 6 or 7 yards, and it's like, no, done.
Yeah, I mean,
plays over.
It's bizarre. I know that the Seahawks kind of deliberately focus on this hawk tackling stuff that they term it hawk tackles, I think, which is basically it's basically like a rugby tackle. You're not going for hits.
You're always talking about rugby.
They have a video.
I never bring up other sports or anything like that, and you're just always trying to tie it back to rugby.
They have a video where they walk through how rugby tackling has influenced their tackling. So it's them, not me.
They should try baseball tackling.
Absolutely. Anyway, it's more like rugby tackling where you're focusing on wrapping up rather than hitting, and you're shoulder into the thigh and take the guy down, and they do this twist thing where they use the sort of spin to pull a guy down the ground. The benefit of that is you try and get your head out of the way more, and there's less kind of collision stuff. The negative is that you are exposing yourself to more arm tackle type stuff, and you could potentially lose tackles that way. But Wagner just doesn't let guys out of his grip. It's crazy. He hits a guy with one arm, and when other players with that arm would just get busted through and the guy would be gone, somehow Wagner grips with that arm and just ends up wrapping him up with the rest. It's bizarre.
Yeah,
but impressive.
So he's pretty awesome. And look, I'm the other story I think here with Seattle. I want to talk about Dwayne Brown and the offensive line in a second, but defensively, what Seattle has done, they did put a lot of effort. They put a lot of capital, draft capital, free agent capital into the secondary this offseason. And it was one of those things where you're like, hey, they still have Sherman, they have Chancellor, they have Earl Thomas. Yeah, they needed a number 2 corner, but you can't necessarily anticipate injuries. But now that Richard Sherman's out for the season and Cam Chancellor's out for the season, the fact that this offseason they went and got a guy like Bradley McDougald from Tampa Bay on the open market. They drafted a few different defensive backs, and they all haven't panned out necessarily or contributed just yet. But Shaq Griffin has contributed from day one as the number 2 corner, and now essentially their number 1 corner. They pick up Justin Coleman, essentially, as a free agent or on waivers from the New England Patriots, and he's really done a nice job contributing. Draft-wise, they did draft Tedrick Thompson out of Colorado, Delano Hill out of Michigan. Neither of those guys have necessarily contributed, but I just found it interesting that they've invested in this youth in the secondary. And overall, a lot of it's ended up they've needed those guys this year, and they've missed a bit of a beat, but they're still going strong. They're still a tough team to beat, especially in Seattle.
Yeah, I'm still encouraged by Shaq Griffin. I think he's going to be the perfect fit for that defense.
He's excellent, yeah.
And is a long-term solution there. Yeah, I think they've done pretty well patching up the losses in that secondary. But I think getting Earl Thomas back is huge. We talked at length before about how he's the guy that makes that scheme tick because of what he's able to do as a deep center fielder. I think the same thing is true. He's the guy that's holding that all together by what he's able to do in the middle there. And it enables guys like Shaq Griffin to just go out there and play cornerback and do what he does pretty well.
Can you discuss the offensive line? You wrote something up on the site, profootballfocus.com, a little bit about what has changed now with Dwayne Brown coming in at left tackle, essentially taking over for Reese Odiambo, who took over for George Fant last year. Essentially the worst two left tackles in football for a year and a half straight in Seattle. Now they have Dwayne Brown there, and the results are much better so far.
Yeah, hugely better. I mean, we talked before about how that had bigly that had the potential just creeping back to average. That was the key for that Seahawks line.
That is the key. They're back toward
that. The left tackle situation was the worst one in the entire NFL. Reese Odiambo had a PFF grade of 27.5 when he went down, which is catastrophic. I mean, that's as bad as it gets. You basically have no business being on a football field is what that grade is.
That's pretty bad, yeah.
Dwayne Brown, so far in this season, has a grade of 78.2, which is 22nd in the NFL among all tackles, which is a reasonable place to be in. It's not fantastic, but it's pretty good.
Right.
But just getting off that worst situation in the entire league to anywhere, to being a below average, above average, anywhere, would be a massive achievement because offensive line play is all about your worst link, and their worst link was just getting beat every single play. So getting back to anywhere has put that offensive line in a much better situation. Before Dwayne Brown arrived, they had the league's 30th pass blocking efficiency metric as an offensive line. So they were allowing pressure at a rate of 37.2%, 30th in the league. Since Dwayne Brown has arrived there, they have been allowing pressure at 22.8%, so basically 15% less than they allowed before, which is 10th in the NFL. So they've gone 20 places in the right direction since Brown has arrived.
It's a massive difference. It completely changes the narrative in the story. Because the story, we come on here every week, it's like, well, Seattle's offensive line's bad, and Russell Wilson makes them look good, and, that's just the deal. Like, can they win without this offensive line? Can they get back toward average? They're there. We are seeing it. There were a lot of plays where it does seem like Wilson's running for his life, but those are the ones where we're charging him with pressure. We charged him with 4 himself on Sunday night, and this year he's got over 20. Charged to him because of his own style and his, breaking clean pockets and stuff like that. And he is magical a lot of the time when he gets out of the pocket. I thought the big boss, Chris, did a fantastic job of pointing out how deep he gets on those rollouts and how difficult it is to keep him in the pocket, how good he is at throwing on the run. I mean, he is such a unique talent, and it's been on display this season, and that's why he's getting a lot of this MVP hype.
Yeah, it's a very complex situation with a lot of moving parts because that offensive line still does give up some catastrophically bad plays.
They do.
As a group last night, they gave up, I think, 9 total pressures each. And most of the time those guys get beat, they get beat badly and quickly because that's just the nature of how they're playing.
There's still something to that, right? There were some plays where Wilson had just no shot.
Exactly. And on those plays, it looks really bad, and it does have Wilson running for his life. But the number of times that's happening is dramatically decreased. If just looking at Brown again, Brown has allowed 9 total pressures since starting for the Seahawks at left tackle. Odiambo has games in which he allowed more than 9 total pressures this season. So that's the kind of just the difference you're going to. But I think the line overall has dramatically improved. Like this week they allowed 9 total pressures. That's, I think, a big thing. We charge Wilson for 4 total pressures himself because he does have not even a case of sort of, a lot of the times when you charge quarterbacks for pressures, they're holding onto the ball too long and they're just waiting for something to develop. He has this kind of weird habit of dropping out beyond the pocket, of kind of taking your drop, and instead of hitching at the top and then skipping back up into a clean pocket, he just keeps going backwards. And
like Madden.
Yeah, a lot like Madden, actually. And it does seem to be deliberate because he doesn't mind that. he'll keep going because it sort of buys him the extra time that he's looking for, and then he just starts that weird S-shaped circling in the backfield until he eventually finds something open. But there are a lot of plays where he just keeps dropping past the point where an offensive lineman can be expected to block, and that pressure is going to end up going on him. But it's not necessarily a negative for him, whereas a lot of quarterbacks, they're giving up pressure because they're just completely unaware.
You wouldn't teach this style.
Because they're completely unaware. They don't have any concept of what they're doing. They're just generally not helping out their offensive line. With Wilson, it's like you understand that he knows what he's doing when he's doing this. It's not an abstract. It's not an accidental thing that he's just completely unaware that he's causing himself problems. Right. He's doing this consciously for whatever reason, and it's working out. At which point the pressure is on him, but it's not a big deal.
Geno Smith used to do this early in his career. In particular, Nick Foles early in his career. If you're supposed to set up at 9 and you drop back to 10 or 11, those are plays that are disastrous for tackles.
Yeah,
and they look disastrous. Those are the plays where you're like, oh man, the tackle got whooped. And all it is the defender can see where the quarterback is. The tackle's blocking for a certain angle. And if the defender takes the wider angle to the quarterback, the tackle can't block him, and he looks bad on the play. Every now and again, Wilson will run into a sack when he's vacating backwards, but he does have that great feel for how to get enough depth. He knows his athleticism really well, which I think is the biggest thing. He knows how athletic he is. He did take a couple hits that I thought were unnecessary yesterday, or this season in general, which is really uncharacteristic for him. And that's why, historically a lot of people say, hey, these scrambling quarterbacks can't work in the NFL, or this guy's too small in the NFL. I think the skill is really knowing how to avoid hits. I think Wilson's always been good at knowing how to protect himself, knowing how to avoid hits, whereas a guy like Michael Vick, RG3, those guys weren't really great at that, and that's why they got hurt quite a bit. I thought Kaepernick actually was really good too when he moved around, just making sure that he did not take a massive hit. But either way, Wilson looked great, and I thought the signature play was when the Eagles sent, 7 or 8 blitzers, sent everybody, the 0 blitz, and Wilson, we've
6.
seen this, it was only 6?
Yep.
It felt like everybody.
Yeah.
It was 6 with 4 across.
Because one was unblocked. That tends to feel like everybody when one guy gets through clean.
I thought it was only 3 receivers and 3 guys in coverage.
There was 5 guys. They all got picked up. The 6th on the right-hand side was the guy who had the running back, and that's why
they went 0 blitz either way. It was 0 blitz, and Wilson threw up the corner route to Baldwin, hit him in stride. Wilson has a great feel for how to make those plays, and those are the ones where you can vacate a little bit because you're just buying enough time to get the ball off, because somebody's coming free. But that was outstanding. That pass did not end up as a touchdown down at the 1, and they ended up scoring again. But yeah, Wilson was fantastic Sunday night.
This division becomes really interesting now, especially if the Eagles do beat the Rams next week, because that changes the game between these two teams. Right now,
they're playing for the division.
Right now, the Los Angeles Rams are 9-3. They're 1 game ahead of the Seahawks at 8-4. If the Eagles do beat the Rams next week, obviously that gives Seattle that game back that they can bridge the gap if they win, and then it's all to play for.
Yeah, I mean, either way they're still playing for the division. I don't know how the tiebreakers. No, the tiebreakers would break out with Seattle winning both games. Seattle controls their own destiny in the West.
Effectively, yeah.
Is the key here. And even with no Sherman, even with no Chancellor, we've seen this story before where they kind of trudge through the first half and it's like, hey, is the defense the same? Is the offensive line going to kill them? And it always seems like down the stretch, they're as dangerous as any team in the league.
Well, this game last night, I think, really summed up why it doesn't, as long as they get there, they are as dangerous as anybody.
Agreed.
Because you get Russell Wilson playing like that. I mean, I tweeted that good Russell Wilson is the best quarterback in the league.
Yeah, I've said this with Zach a few times now. His high end is so spectacular.
Yeah.
But his low end
is terrible.
Really low. Like the difference in everybody answering your tweet was like, did you remember that Tom Brady still plays in the league, Sam?
Yeah.
Do you remember Aaron Rodgers? I think the difference with those guys is like bad Tom Brady is still really good. Bad Russell Wilson is really, really bad.
And they don't come along that often.
Right.
Bad Tom Brady and bad Aaron Rodgers don't tend to show up that often.
Right.
Bad Russell Wilson's out there quite a bit. But good Russell Wilson, when you get him on his game like he was yesterday, it's almost impossible to defend him.
Yep.
I mean, what do you do? The Seahawks had a huge amount of pressure coming down on him. Didn't matter. They had pretty good coverage on a lot of the plays. Didn't matter. They did a reasonable job of bottling him up and keeping him in the pocket. Didn't matter. He still took off and made some plays. I mean, there's basically nothing you can do. You just have to hope that they don't get enough of those big plays for it to matter, or that your offense can get enough going on the other side to win the shootout. But that is why, you just don't want to be playing the Seahawks in the playoffs, regardless of what they look like coming into it, because Russell Wilson is capable of doing that. No matter what happens, you're going to be more comfortable facing the Minnesota Vikings and Case Keenum than you are facing Russell Wilson, and the chance that you get good Russell Wilson showing up that day.
Yeah, completely agree. Just to put a bow on the Seahawks, Wilson leading the league in big-time throws, but also now he's second in the league, tied for second in turnover-worthy throws. He was leading the league in both coming into the game, and I think that just shows how volatile he is. He's getting this MVP hype because, that happened on Sunday Night Football, and he was great in primetime. It is difficult to put past, though. Washington a few weeks ago, he was terrible. Just against San Francisco, both games this year, bad in both San Francisco games. Easily could have had about 8 interceptions against San Francisco in 2 games. Eagles on the other side, Carson Wentz, we gave him some flack for his play under pressure early in the season. He's been outstanding the last couple weeks, upped his passer rating by about 40 points just under pressure alone. He had those couple spectacular throws down the field outside the pocket where everybody was going nuts. I do think, though, going back to the boss again, I think he summed up the game pretty well. It was the fumble that you mentioned in that missed crossing route. When you get a busted coverage against the Seattle defense on the old crosser against cover 3, they don't do that. They don't bust that coverage very often. You have to take advantage of it, and that was probably the difference in the game right there. Those 2 plays, fumble on the way in and a potential 50-yard gain, potentially a touchdown that was missed.
Yeah, I honestly think this is a totally different game if they score instead of fumbling that play. I think that changed everything in this game. But yeah, so he was under pressure 8 more plays than he was kept clean in this game, which again, we said was a huge part of this. But his passer rating was 94.6 when he was pressured and was only 73.5 when he was kept clean. That part, I think, is also a bit of a problem in this game anyway, that he just wasn't as good as we've seen him in the past when everything was actually working.
It was really dink and dunk like crazy early on, right?
Yeah.
Dink and dunk, short pass. He came out with a lot of good rhythm in the second half too. So before the fumble, there was like 4 or 5 good passes, all between the numbers, showing that big arm, the good zip, looked great, and then the fumble. And then he had those 2 spectacular throws. It was the one outside the pocket where he got it up and over. It looked like it was just going to be a prayer, but he got it to Aguilar well outside the pocket as he was getting tackled. And then the one where he maneuvered the pocket kind of through the deep ball, the touchdown across the field. I mean, those 2 plays were spectacular. But, beyond that, it was, a couple nice throws and just a lot of dinking and dunking. And honestly, his interception at the end of the game, too, kind of a bad decision. They were down 2 touchdowns. Game wasn't over yet. And he was playing it like, let's just throw a Hail Mary up there.
To Aguilar.
Who, as you mentioned to me off air,
yeah,
not particularly physical.
Not really a contested catch kind of guy, in that as soon as anybody made contact with him, he basically fell over looking for a flag as opposed to contesting and trying to get the ball. Not the guy I would be throwing into double coverage with in the end zone, hoping to pull it down.
No, I hear you. Eagles still maybe the best team in the league. I don't think this takes anything away from them. Still extremely well-rounded on the defensive side of the ball. They can run the ball. They can still beat you in any way, but I think it was definitely a huge statement game for the Seahawks. Loving the way this NFC is really shaping up. The next section of the pod, we always seem to talk about fighting. We always dedicate a few minutes to a few little stories around the NFL, some important stories around the NFL. Yesterday, Rob Gronkowski's cheap shot on Tre'Davious White is a big story. I know you had a few takes on the Twitter machine about it, but there's no pulling punches on this thing. Gronk was frustrated about the way they were playing, and Brady throws an interception, and then for whatever reason just goes out of his way to cheap shot Tre'Davious White when he's on the ground, throws a forearm shiver on him, and concusses the poor rookie cornerback who just came away with an interception on the greatest quarterback of all time. Must have been happy before that.
That's the big thing about it, is that this caused concussion. And with everything we now know about concussions and CTE and that kind of stuff, it kind of elevates this to a completely different level. It was such a weird play in that you can almost see the cog spinning in Gronk's head, where he's out of his mind with rage because these calls haven't been given to him. Tre'Davious White held him on the play, kind of shoved him out of the way to make the catch. Nothing called. Gets an interception, clean, hits the ground. He's lying on the ground with his interception. Gronk is just out of his mind with rage because nothing has been called. And you can see he's like, right, I really want to hit this guy. But Gronk, ultimate football player at heart, he knows that the only way to really hit a guy is to launch your shoulder into him. So despite the fact that Tre'Davious White is lying on the ground, Gronk basically launches himself shoulder first into the guy to make the hit, ultimately delivering him a concussion. But what I think is interesting about this is, like, this isn't a football play. This isn't a late hit on a quarterback that was sort of a bit beyond the realms of what you expect and what's acceptable, and that drew a flag. This is basically an assault that happened to take part on the field. And, I mean, that in and of itself is not good. So you could say the same thing with, the A.J. Green, Jalen Ramsey fight. That's effectively the same thing. A.J. Green's pissed off. He snaps. He launches himself towards Jalen Ramsey and tries to choke him out. Effectively the same thing, an assault. But one, I think they're slightly different where two guys are fighting, and it's just, the two guys are capable of being involved in that.
Right.
Jalen Ramsey may have been at a disadvantage in that A.J. Green took his back and was busy sinking the hooks in to choke him out before he knew what was going on. But Tre'Davious White's just lying on the ground. Somebody launches himself into the back of his head and concusses him. Like, that's not a one-on-one fight. That's a guy getting a shot to the back of the head, which concusses him. Now, where I found this kind of interesting is Chris Nowinski tweeted about it. And Chris Nowinski, if you don't know, is
just read his Twitter bio.
Oh, I will. Oh, read his Twitter bio. Okay, Chris Nowinski.
This is how you give this background.
Chris Nowinski, PhD. That's his handle. He actually has PhD in his handle, which I'm just going to put that out there. I'm not going to comment. Presented without comment. Chris Nowinski, PhD, founding CEO of Concussion LF, whatever that is. Co-founder of the Boston University CTE Center. That's the place that basically everybody sends their brains to be, looked at for CTE. PhD in behavioral neuroscience, author of Head Games, and former WWE superstar, fighting concussions and CTE. That is quite the interesting bio.
The guy's done it all. He's pretty much done it all by the age of 30.
Yeah, but basically he's the guy driving all of this concussion stuff, trying to improve awareness about it, improve understanding, and decrease the damage it's done to everybody. So he tweeted that Gronk's tweet shot gave Tre'Davious White a concussion. If he's not suspended, it signals cheap shots are fair game now in the NFL. Had it been Tom Brady's knee, player would be banned for life. Just because you can't see his injured brain doesn't mean it's not as serious. Now, leaving aside the nitpicking part about what would actually happen if it was a guy's knee involved, blah, blah. The point is, he was driving that. And I think in today's world of concussions and litigation and all that kind of stuff, we cannot be a million miles away from a player suing somebody for a cheap shot like that. I was lying on the ground. Suddenly I've got a concussion. And maybe it's not going to be a current guy, but maybe it's 20. If 20 years down the line, if Tre'Davious White turns out that he's suffering from cognitive problems, it wouldn't surprise me if something like that ends up the player itself, in addition to the league, starts getting sued for hits like that.
I mean, technically, though, too, you could even say, if guys have incentives in their contract and then they have to miss a game because a guy straight up injured them, and it's like, well, I'm one interception away from $500,000, or what if it was Adrian Claiborne, before he reached his sack incentive of $750,000, whatever it was. So there might be something to it.
So people on Twitter were busy telling me it's a terrible legal case. It's never going to stand up. Civil lawsuits are essentially, you've done something to me that has damaged me. You need to put me back. You need to redress that problem. Put me back in a state of completeness, right? Tre'Davious White there has been cheap shotted. It has demonstrably damaged him in terms of concussion. I think that legally speaking, it's reasonable that there should be a case to answer in terms of redress, in terms of putting him back to whole. Who knows what that concussion has done to his health going forward? I think we're in a country where people get sued just for tripping over in somebody's driveway constantly. I'm just surprised we haven't yet hit the stage where somebody is suing somebody else for a hit like that.
I just hope we're not sitting here discussing it any further. Anyway, let's fly around the league real quick. Ben McAdoo fired just before. Jerry Reese as well. So it's GM and head coach.
Well, all they had to do with Ben McAdoo is revoke his key card because he said he was going to coach there until his key card didn't work anymore.
Now we've changed the codes.
Yeah, now it doesn't work anymore. He went to swipe, and instead of flashing green, it stayed red. It wasn't letting him in the building.
It's a nice building over there. You've been there a few times.
I have. It's nice.
With me, right?
Yeah, it is. It's pretty slick.
Nice little setup. They got a lot, Lombardi's on display and all that stuff. Nice little setup.
Yeah, it's a nice place. I mean, this was coming, right? The whole thing was.
I think so. Look, this year's been bad. I keep playing devil's advocate with.
Yeah, you're really working hard to
McAdoo. I'm not trying to go to bat for him necessarily, but if you really just evaluate his 2 years, they did overachieve last year, right? And when a head coach has a team that overachieves, I think that guy gets some credit. They should not have been a playoff team last year.
Yeah, but I don't think that's Ben McAdoo. Here's the thing, right? Ben McAdoo comes into the building as the architect behind Aaron Rodgers' brilliance, right? Offensive mind, he's going to turn Eli Manning back into the quarterback he was in 2011. All's going to be well with the Giants' offense. Last year, the Giants' offense sucked, and the defense played out of its mind, and they won a bunch of games they had no business winning. That's not in Ben McAdoo's plus column.
But he's also been there since 2014, and he did get Eli back on track a little bit, 2014 and 15. Statistically,
statistically.
But that's the ultimate. But that's the thing. If you're the offensive coordinator, ultimately you just need to get the final result. It doesn't matter about the quarterbacks.
But what are the statistics we're looking at?
For a couple of years, they were decent.
But what numbers are we looking at here? We're looking at his yardage and we're looking at the stuff where if you just say, right, we're going to ramp up your easy, high percentage short passes and they're going to do all the work for you, your numbers are going to start to look awesome. We may not do any better, but...
He's dealing with an aging Eli Manning.
Right? I'm just saying, I don't know that Eli Manning's play actually improved under Ben McAdoo. I think his broad box score numbers did, but again, what did that do?
Yeah, I mean... That's fine. Look,
so the overall point is the team hasn't done well, and now they're terrible. So makes sense.
All I'm saying, there's been 2 years of McAdoo. 1 year, last year he was a coach of the year candidate, wasn't he?
No.
Giants come out of nowhere and they're 11-5 and go to the playoffs.
Yeah, but again, that wasn't him.
But they get credit. The head coach gets credit for that. They get credit for being the head coach that gets on a team that gets 11 wins on a team that was not expected to do much.
In whose eyes?
Just general perception.
Well, I'm not giving him credit for it, and it doesn't sound like the Giants' ownership is giving him credit for it because they've just turfed him out of the building.
Well, it's been a disaster this season.
Yeah.
And it sounds like it could be this completely new look with the Giants.
It has to be. I mean, everything's being redone. There's a lot of talent still there in that defense. The offense is the big question, and that's the ridiculous thing about all of this is he's probably right about the idea of needing to figure out what they have in the quarterbacks beyond Eli Manning, because whether Eli Manning is there in 2018 or not, he's not going to be there in 2019 and beyond because he really is on the way. At which point you need to figure out what you have in Geno Smith and Davis Webb. Now, I think there's a pretty good chance we already knew what they had in Geno Smith, and it's not worth taking a look at, which is part of your problem. But they're going to need to figure out what they have in Davis Webb pretty quickly because they are probably going to need another quarterback to be added to that list.
Well, that's the thing. Big picture, it's not a crazy thing for him to say, we're moving on from Eli so we could see what else is going on.
That's what I'm saying. I think that's the one thing he's got right in all this.
Yeah, well, it sounds like Eli might be back for next week already.
Which is possibly the worst thing they could do. I mean, you've ruined a start streak, so that's done. What purpose does going back to Eli have at the end of this season now?
Being nice to him.
But who cares?
No, I don't care.
No, you don't need to be nice to your quarterback. Like we said before the show, almost every single great quarterback in history, it has ended badly because that's just how it works. You get old, you're usually the last person to see that you can't do it anymore, and eventually the ownership, the management has to take the decision from you and say, look, we're moving on.
Bill Walsh was dying to get rid of Joe Montana for Steve Young. He was dying to get him.
Joe Montana gets shipped off to Kansas City. Brett Favre eventually has to get drop kicked out of the building so they can get Aaron Rodgers on the field.
Drop kicked out of the building.
Basically, the only two guys that it's ended well for are John Elway and Peyton Manning. And even Peyton Manning, as you say, got benched in the middle of that season. They just ended up bringing him back.
Right.
But basically, those two guys got the fairy tale ending. Everyone else has gone out under crappy circumstances.
And it's just Eli. Now, look, they could have been nice to him, but We'll see. Get him a couple more games with the Giants, and then maybe he's somewhere else next season. Flying around the league, a couple more things. You were just fascinated by Taysom Hill, this story. Former BYU quarterback. He's like 42 years old. He's really 27. He's a rookie. He was in Matt Barkley's recruiting class, by the way. He's a rookie this year. He was in Matt Barkley's recruiting class back in the day. 6 years at BYU, I believe. Many injuries and just a lot that he dealt with. Very exciting player when he was on the field at BYU. But he's with the Saints. He's their number 3 quarterback. And yesterday he made 2 special teams tackles, and Fox was just dying to talk about him. They could not wait to talk about Taysom Hill and his work on special teams after talking to Sean Payton all week.
Led the team in special teams tackles.
Oh, sorry. Team leader,
with
Taysom
2.
Hill, with 2 yesterday, in their victory.
And made another hit as well on special teams. I saw him blowing up somebody else. Didn't make the tackle on that play.
Just watching, what is it, number 7? Just running around with gloves, playing special teams.
Playing special teams. He is a quarterback out there playing special teams, which is basically unheard of.
I like it.
And kind of fun to see. And there's kind of something to the idea that it does fire everybody up on that sideline. You know, it's ridiculous and it's bizarre, and I can't actually find a logical reason for it to be taking place. But it does fire everybody up on that sideline when he goes down there, makes a hit, makes a tackle. There's something to that. It's a kind of morale-boosting thing.
That's why Iowa State linebacker Joel Lanning this year, who's their quarterback, when he started to play linebacker, and he was racking up 10, 15 tackles in a game, everybody was calling him a Heisman candidate, even though he's not really the best linebacker, even close in the country, and he's just an okay quarterback. Everybody was all fired up when the quarterback's playing linebacker. And it's a good story.
Who was the Steelers punter who was like a linebacker, former linebacker, who used to run down and jack punt returners after he kicked off?
That I don't.
What was his name? You talk. I'll figure out who he was.
That's a little too much information right there.
No, it's not.
That's supposed to be like this understood thing that happens, but you just told everybody. All right, well, let me just get to our next couple announcements while you're
if you were a pro, you would be able to patch over that. And
if you were a pro, you wouldn't tell the people what was happening.
They'd figure it out. They're smart listeners.
I can relate that to baseball.
No, don't relate it to baseball.
It's a funny story.
No, it's not.
It's a funny story.
I promise you it is.
I think Taylor wants to hear it.
Daniel Sepulveda.
Oh, that guy. He was a linebacker?
Yeah, in like high school, he was a linebacker, and then they made him into a punter because it turns out he has a big leg. And his entire highlight reel is just him booming the ball down the field, sprinting down after it, and jacking return men.
You're ruining the podcast.
I'm telling you an interesting tale about Daniel Sepulveda.
And what I'm doing is my story.
What I'm doing is ruining Taylor's time organization of this
Taylor wants
podcast.
us to get moving.
Absolutely.
We're getting the wrap it
See,
up.
I see we spend the next 10 minutes talking about Sepulveda.
Just rambling on.
We should fire up his highlight reel, talk about it, so Taylor's...
talk through it.
So, yeah, exactly. Yeah. So Taylor's timeline is ruined.
If you guys want to hear my baseball story, which I think is relatable, podcasts at profootballfocus.com. Let us know if you want to hear more baseball stories from Steve.
Oh, God.
All right, we do have a couple more things to hit. We have an injury situation.
Oh, no. There's a man down.
Jimmy Smith, Baltimore Ravens, injured, suspended. He's got it all going on right now, but he's out for the season, but also serving a 4-game suspension, which figure this one out for me. How can you serve a 4-game suspension when you're already going to be out for the season due to injury?
Well, that's exactly how. As soon as he tore his Achilles, he stopped his appeal for his suspension, and now he'll just serve it while he's sitting on the couch resting up.
More importantly, how big of a loss is this for the Ravens?
Oh, I think it's a huge loss to them. I'm really fascinated in when he was popped for the PEDs because Jimmy Smith this season has been the best Jimmy Smith we have seen throughout his entire career and has been a really, really top quality player. He has given up no touchdowns this season, only 292 receiving yards all year, 3 interceptions, 5 pass breakups, has still allowed a passer rating of under 50 when targeted. Obviously, the NFL average is like 90-something, so it's a huge drop. Jimmy Smith has played fantastic this year, so I'm really curious when exactly he was using those PEDs and if they happen to bear any relation or not to this dramatically improved play.
Just like David Irving sitting there right now, dominating up front for the Dallas Cowboys after his suspension. This is a big deal for the Ravens, though, because they're starting to roll. They're rolling defensively. The offense is terrible, even though they showed signs of life yesterday. And if they're going to make any sort of push in the playoffs, it's going to be a defensive-centric one. And losing a guy like Jimmy Smith is a big loss.
I think they're still in okay shape in that Marlon Humphrey, the rookie, has been playing really quite well. Brandon Carr has played okay. Ladarius Webb, I think, is still a vaguely capable defensive back, although he's struggling a little bit. I think they're fine with that group. Their problem is now there's no depth. Like, they are razor thin, and if they lose anybody to injury, they're in deep trouble.
Absolutely. So keep an eye on that. We have another tally. It's, we still have rest in peace over here. Menelik Watson sitting right next to me, the post-it that still has him sitting at 9 sacks. But just above it, we have Des Bryant PDs. And Dak made a bad decision. He threw a dig route into a breaking quarter safety. And the quarter safety had a better shot at the pass than Des Bryant did. But Des got his hand on it. He broke it up. We got 9 pass breakups now for Des Bryant. Sam, where does he rank in the NFL?
Yeah, that means wide receiver Des Bryant now ranks 11th in overall pass breakups for defenders. He's dropping down the list. Des is not getting as many pass breakups as some of these other top corners in the NFL, and he's falling down the overall ranking in pass breakups. But 11 is still a very respectable figure and higher than many notable corners. For example, Jimmy Smith, we just talked about, is just 5. So, yeah, Des Bryant, wide receiver, still racking up the PDs.
Yeah, Dak needs to give him more opportunities.
Absolutely.
For pass breakups.
Put your players in the best position to succeed, and for Des Bryant, that is breaking up bad decision interceptions.
Time for our signature stats of the week, courtesy of PFF Elite. You guys can get in on the action, PFF Elite or Edge, over at ProFootballFocus.com. You guys can also get $10 off when you use the promo code PFF10. And if you guys are on the fence about grabbing Elite, go ahead and check the monthly feature. You can also use that $10 off on PFF Elite monthly as well. Go give it a shot and see if it's something you'd want for the entire year. Don't forget, when you guys sign up, you have it for the year. So if you sign up today, early December, it'll expire next year, early December. So you'll essentially be locked in for the majority of the 2018 season. All of this includes all of our signature stats that are a part of Elite, but also Edge has all of our fantasy tools, all of our draft coverage that's coming up. And we also have a few goodies that we'll unveil over the next couple weeks involving free agency and quarterbacks and some other stuff along the way. So go ahead and get on the action. Sam, you got our first signature stat of the week?
Yeah, just to circle back around, a little bit of breaking news, semi-breaking. Gronks suspended for the next game for that hit.
And he will
pending
appeal it.
Pending appeal. I would think that'll hold up, though, given the precedent they've set with other fracas so far this season.
Yeah, I mean, I think suspending him some level is absolutely fair.
Yeah. Right. First statistic. 3 quarterbacks this season have thrown no touchdowns whatsoever when under pressure, on their plays under pressure. Drew Brees, 0 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Joe Flacco, 0 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. Derek Carr, 0 touchdowns, 5 interceptions when under pressure.
Wow, that's good numbers there, Sam. Crazy stats.
Bad ratios.
So I'm surprised about Brees.
Yeah.
So Brees is grading well for us overall, but there are some warning signs in his play.
Uh-oh. Warning signs.
That being one of them. All right, let's go to...
that'll get you into trouble. I've been down that road before with warning signs and quarterbacks.
I'm not making a declarative statement here. I'm just saying...
Just saying, that's how it started.
Anyway, some wide receiver stats. The league leaders in yards from the slot. I'm going to give you the top 3, and I like the names here. Larry Fitzgerald of the Arizona Cardinals leading the league with 632 yards when lined up in the slot. Number 2, your boy Nelson Aguilar, breakout season with 582 yards from the slot. And then Golden Tate with 576. You got old man Fitzgerald still doing it. We got Aguilar in year 3 breaking out. And old dependable Golden Tate, who's so good after the catch and just probably one of the most underrated receivers in the entire league. All of that coming from the slot and all a part of PFF Elite.
So, the third and final statistical delve is Brett Hundley this week. The Packers ended up winning the game. Brett Hundley had 84 passing yards overall. Now, that in and of itself is pretty ridiculous. But obviously, those are box score numbers. We're going to go deeper. Didn't complete a single pass over 10 yards, but here are the great numbers.
This is a good one.
Had an average depth of target of 8.5 yards down the field, which is normal. That's about, average range, middle of the pack kind of. That average depth of target of 8.5 yards down the field ended up giving him 8 air yards for the day. So of his 84 passing yards, only 8 of them came in the air. The rest were all after the catch by his receivers.
That's crazy. So you get some screens in there and all that stuff where it's like negative air yards, but 8.
8.
We don't see percentages that low.
No.
As for a game. There was a game a couple years ago, Alex Smith had like 4 touchdowns against the Raiders, and almost all of them came on screens. This is up. It was like 90% after the catch. That's crazy number.
It's phenomenal. 8.5 yards as an average depth of target, and you get 8 air yards at the end of it.
Yeah, so I don't think Hundley's really turned a corner.
No.
Yet. He's still
not good.
He's still struggled a little bit. Well, that'll just about do it for us today. That's your Week 13 review podcast. Don't forget, we've got an entire week of action. Quarterback Pod Tuesday, your mailbag version on Wednesday. Still trying to get a very special guest lined up for that. And then Friday, your Week 14 preview. So stick with the PFF podcast. Get to ProFootballFocus.com for both Edge and Elite. And if you're new, hit that subscribe button. Stick with us not only during the season, but off-season as well. We'll be here all year with all sorts of fun stuff as well, including Mike Renner every now and again. So thanks again, guys, for listening. We'll talk to you guys next time.